Edward. I'd like to just spend a few minutes to talk about Jeremy's book, Crystal Street, and its place in the Australian literary tradition. I think Australian literature has, from its very inception, been dominated by notions of realism, perhaps dictated by the bleakness of the harsh landscape that so dominates our nation. The struggles of convicts and immigrants in an alien and hostile place, an environment of isolation and conflict, naturally gave birth to a realist literature. Jeremy's work, Crystal Street, following closely as it does Edward's seminal work, Lives of the Saints, has its place firmly in the subgenre of dirty realism. However, whereas dirty realism, like Australian literature generally, has turned from the realism of the rural to the rural and outback to focus its attentions almost exclusively on the inner city, both Jeremy's and Edward's works both hone in on the underrepresented suburbs. In both works, everything is immediately recognizable to the reader. Places, names, people, and it is utterly inclusive of the majority of the Australian public, living as they do, mostly in suburbia. We must not forget that for most of Australia's history, the majority of the population has dwelt neither in the outback nor in the inner city, which now more and more is an unattainable place of residency for your everyday Australian, of course, but in the massive sprawling suburbs and the regional cities like Wollongong and Newcastle, which is where I'm from originally. In this, both Jeremy and Edward make a leap from the cloistered world of the inner city and the parochial and narrow-minded views of Australian society to the more expansive one of suburbia. Australian literature as a whole has seemed to be unwilling or perhaps even embarrassed by this world of the suburbs. Perhaps as is so often the setting for tawdry TV melodramas. But it's here that both Edward and Jeremy both see a vibrant and underrepresented world, ripe for great future works of Australian literature. A departure from a view of Australia from the outside, looking in, and from above, from university creative writing departments, to give full rein to authentic suburban voices. And in this, Edward and Jeremy both see a waiting market for Australians hungry to read stories about their own worlds. We only need to look at the predominance of foreign books on Australian bookstore shelves to realise this, that this is a massive untouched market. Like Edward's Life of the Saints, Jeremy's work, Crystal Street, seeks to give voice to these suburban perspectives. And here we might tentatively define this developing genre as Australian neorealism. Like the neorealism of post-war Italian cinema, Jeremy and Edward's stories focus on the desperation and injustice of the everyday lives of the poor and working classes in simple moral worlds where survival is the defining motivation. In Crystal Street, episode after episode, scenes are set up by the presentation of a point of view, a poetic camera angle, as it were, a presentation of the scene which is followed by dialogue. The internal voices of the characters is studiously avoided, and the characters themselves give little or no explanation for their actions. There is barely any matter at all. There is, however, a multiplicity of details, from the piss-stained underpants of a junkie couple's neighbour to roses curling around the wooden trellises of rundown terrace houses. Jeremy, like the directors of neorealist cinema, provides us, he forgoes fictional constructs and instead populates his world with authentic figures. And the dialogue, taken directly from life, has been described as utterly authentic and a brutal articulation of a poverty-lined lifestyle. And yet, as in cinema, the raw images give life to lyricism through detail, sublimated to a lyrical truth by their very expression. Bleakness gives way to hope. And that's what I think defines Australian neorealism and separates it from dirty realism as a whole. So I'd like to just read a little bit that I think illustrates this point well. This is from Jeremy's Crystal Street. They went down the back street that ran behind the bottle shop, turning right into the street that ran past the library down to the school. An old semi-detached with overgrown weeds and old copies of the local paper rotting. There were patches of earth where the papers had killed the life underneath. On the porch, there were two upturned milk crates, one blue and one black. with yellow foam cushions. A cat with a weeping eye looked up from the blue one, jumped off, and rubbed up against the girl's leg. It left black hair on her white tracksuit leg. But why are we interested in figures like Steve or Frank? Because although we may not be a Steve or a Frank ourselves, we see them in our everyday lives. In the scene in the hospital, which Jeremy is going to read from later, where Steve goes to receive the methadone script he's been forced to accept as payment in lieu of cash for an earlier drug deal, he dwindles into almost non-existence as he follows the conversation of the injured woman, her partner, and her friends. Their dialogue reveals their world, one which is utterly real and immediately recognizable. Like the tyrannical fate of Greek and Roman tragedy, in Crystal Street, cosmic forces conspire to crush the individual despite their every attempt to heroically fight against them. As in an earlier Australian realism, the landscape itself is an ever-present antagonist, a constant threat. In Crystal Street, the bush and the outback, with its snakes and back bushfires, is replaced with the winding streets of the inner west, the threat of the locals, and the ever-present police detectives, the Deans, who lay in wait for Steve, real and unreal, behind every brick wall. Distance itself is a tyrant in Steve's world. When his bike is taken from him, he is forced to walk, and this renders his struggle to make enough money to pay off the man and survive all the more impossible. Crystal Street itself looms large as a character in the work, after which it is aptly named. Jeremy's work, however, I think, is largely in itself a radical departure from realist literature that we have seen previously, in that it allows redemption. And I think that this redemption is the defining aspect of the developing genre of Australian neorealism. But enough from me. I will let the man himself talk to you with some bits of it. Thank you very much.